走，不，反了，脚反了，转过来，这样，这个就在前面，对，来，晃起来，晃起来，我脚晃手晃，跟着我啊，有点节奏，哎，好，1、2，哎，就像跳舞一样，哎，好，往前走，2、3、4，你到底走不走？来，走，1、2、3、4，是吧？太牛了！来，再来一遍啊！来，1、2、3、4。哎呀，子枫，我不是跟你说了吗？手腕的速度要快！
不行，这速度还是太慢啊！这样想拿名次不太可能啊！
没想到我闪电居然会有被人说慢的一天。有没有什么绝招呢？可以打败天下无敌手的呢？当然没有了。
也许有。想当年，杨岩凭借死亡华尔兹打遍国内无敌手。
工具。1776年，法国著名击剑大师拉布瓦西埃发明了面罩。这一发明使击剑运动真正得到了全面的发展。19世击剑是以速度、力量、击出和自控为特点的运动项目，其对手是人，而人在运用所掌握的技术、战术与行为习惯具有不确定性，因此心理潜力的积蓄也格外重要。
Alright, there's kind of a lot to process in that training montage. The way that they started was all wrong. They didn't bring up the on guard, they didn't bring up even the starting position, they didn't bring up how to hold it, they didn't bring up how to move any sort of advances or retreats or anything like that. They just kind of started moving, which I think would make it seem more seamless or something, because it's a TV show and they want things to keep moving and to make it look like he's really picking it up. But the thing is, fencing is different from a lot of martial arts, obviously. And one way that it's different is that the movements are not as natural to the human body as any others. So whether you start with no martial arts experience, or certainly if you come from, in this case, a boxing background, there are definitely things that you have to unlearn before you can learn how to do it properly in terms of fencing. Right off the bat, not even sure if he's holding it right here, but I'm not going to go into that because he is holding it right later on, so that's fine. However, his footwork is rather poor. His foot is facing the wrong direction. It's pointed way off to the inside, which is a very bad habit. It doesn't provide a whole lot of balance if you do it wrong, and it can throw off your entire body as well. It seems like something that wouldn't really make that much of an impact, but the faster you move, the more it does have an impact on how your body is positioned. It can affect everything all the way up to the torso. So the toe pointed forward is actually one of the most important things that coaches look at, especially when someone is still learning how to fence. They have completely skipped over that part, so that already more or less invalidates what they're doing, because they missed one of the very first steps to teaching someone. They also are encouraging just regular I mean, according to the subtitles, they're calling it strikes, but any sort of attack or cut they're doing wrong, although it's something that they've already gotten wrong even with the other experienced fencers in the show. I mean, they're not actual fencers. The actors portrayed as experienced fencers, they also got this wrong. They're not cutting with the tip of the blade, they're not cutting with their fingers. They are using their entire wrist and arm in order to make these broad sweeping movements, which is not what you want to do. It's easy to see coming, it's easy to stop, and it's just all around not a good idea. It's also slower and less efficient.
If you can be one thing, you should be efficient.
So yeah, you want lighter, faster cuts. So they did get it right in the fact that his hand is supposed to be going faster, but the thing is they're not teaching him how to do it. Basically, he's doing something wrong over and over again, and they're saying you should be faster, but they're not teaching him how. And there are ways to be faster. It's not just a matter of be faster. That's like if in anything you were asking for advice because you were doing it wrong, and someone says, oh, just be better. It's like, okay, that doesn't really help me, but thanks. So there are ways to actually be faster instead of just, putting more effort and more gumption into it. And part of that is learning how to cut with the right parts of your hand, to do it with the actual fingers, and to have the right setup. There are ways to do it. It's definitely not something that you would learn in a month. It kind of depends on where you learn and how many lessons within that month you take. But the average is about 2 lessons a week, or 2 classes a week. Might be private, might be not. So that's the kind of thing that people start to introduce in the first month, because you don't want them to learn how to do it the wrong way and then have to spend however long it takes to unlearn that. So they do introduce it somewhere within that first month. It really depends on where you go, but they probably wouldn't expect you to have a very fast attack right off the bat. In this case, they're dumping like all these fairly, what looks to be like very intermediate moves to a total beginner. I don't care if he has boxing experience, he doesn't have fencing experience, and therefore it's too early. They're dumping a lot on him that he shouldn't be ready for, and I don't care how talented you might be. There's no way you can make that much progress in a month. I've seen very talented people who pick it up very quickly, and even then, they only became like competitively viable until about a year in. And that's the most talented I've seen. So no one can do it in a month. There's also something odd here. He's practicing this one technique, which I'll get into later. At one point, he does it against 2 people. I don't know why you would practice that, because it's never going to come up. And the thing is, I've fenced 2 people at once purely because it was fun. We were just messing around. We decided to see how it would go, and I can tell you it is very different than fencing just one person. So I don't know why you would practice against 2. It doesn't really make any sense. The other thing is they're doing something called a death waltz, which I'm not totally sure exactly what that encompasses, because it's clearly a made-up term. But it looks like they're doing something very close to a flunge. It's something that only exists in Saber. It's a cross between a lunge and a flesh. A lunge is a very common way to attack in all 3 weapons. A flesh is an uncommon way to attack in foil and epee. And it used to be that way in Saber, but I'm not really going to get into the history of it. But it was eventually banned from Saber for a couple reasons. However, they couldn't really just say no more fleshes. They had to pick something about it that couldn't be, adjusted, tweaked, or, basically left up to an opinion of whether or not it was a flesh versus just a really long lunge or something like that. They had to find something that really set it out from anything else, and they found that in the legs. The difference between the flesh and any other attack was that the back foot crossed the front foot. So they said in saber, the back foot cannot come in front of the front foot, which in saber effectively eliminated the flesh. Some people got around it, though, by inventing something called the flunge, where it starts the same as a flesh, but it doesn't follow through the same way and turns into more of a lunge. So it's pretty uncommon, and there are enough downsides to it that most people don't really do it, especially in higher competition. It does occasionally happen, but it's very uncommon. But I think that's what they're referring to as a death waltz. I do like the name, though. It's kind of funny. But yeah, it looks like the closest thing to a death waltz is a flunge. I don't know if that's the full thing yet. We'll probably find out later. But again, that's something that most coaches don't even teach. Some of them do, but most of the time it's actually fencers who sort of saw other people do it and decided to try it out. And I only know a few fencers, whether personally or not, who even practice it. I think there's only one fencer that's sort of like more or less a household name in the fencing community, at least, who will actually do the flunge every now and then on like a more major stage. His name is Daryl Homer, and he's very good, but most other people don't really attempt it too much. So again, that's just another example of they're piling way too much onto this guy. And the thing is, obviously there's no such thing as a technique that can, is like some secret technique that can beat anyone. Obviously, if such a thing existed, everyone would start using it, and there would be, even if it was something that was extremely difficult to do, there would still be hundreds of people the world over that would be able to learn how to do it. So it's obviously not a thing that exists. And I hate the fact that they brought up that they sort of created something that is kind of like that, because it's obviously just so far off the mark. I understand, I've seen that kind of thing in like a lot of kung fu movies, and I understand it's entertaining, but it's really, it's not realistic at all. And in fact, it doesn't even matter if you have a good like type of attack. It only really works if you understand when and where to use it. It's not enough to be good at the technique. You need to be able to find the right setup, the right situation, the right distance, the right timing, and you had to be familiar with all those variables to the point that you can slightly adjust them according to how your opponent reacts, because not everyone is the same. So it's not even enough, even if he was some superhuman who got to the point that he could do this kind of thing within a month, less than a month, it still wouldn't be enough. He would still have to just gain experience against other people to be able to learn when and where to do it. It's not enough to know how. You need to know those other two things, and you need to know them well enough that you don't have to spend a lot of time, fussing about whether, this is the right time or not. You need to make a decision like that in order to do it, and you need to know if it's good enough to, if it's the right situation. So I honestly really hate the fact that they're painting it as this, one technique that will, beat anyone. It just doesn't work like that.